So, on to the meat of the talk. As I said, most of you probably already use this to some degree, either socially or professionally. And if you know more than me about this, please feel free to contribute. I'm certainly not an expert, I'm just someone who's found it useful. The Wikipedia definition of social media is a group of internet-based applications that build on the ideological and technological foundations of Web 2.0 and that allow the creation and exchange of user-generated content, which begs the question, what is Web 2.0? Web 2.0 is been variously defined, but basically it's suggests that it's cumulative changes in the way software developers and end users use the web. And a Web 2.0 site allows users to interact and collaborate with each other in a social media dialogue as creators of user-generated content in a virtual community. There's some argument as to whether Web 2.0 is a real thing or whether it's actually what the inventor of the web, a guy called Tim Berners-Lee, actually originally envisaged for the web, and it's actually just the natural evolution of the thing. So, with a bit of background, I've killed a few minutes. The meat of the talk will be a bit shorter. This is the question I come to. Discuss social media or Web 2.0. Anyone who's recently done the fellowship exam or is studying for it at the moment, discuss means talk about the pros and cons. And so here goes. I've already alluded to the perceived con of time wasting, etc., which is no doubt a real phenomenon. But I think that's a function of human nature and it's got nothing to do with the technology. Some other criticisms that have been levelled at social media by various commentators include things like this. Andrew Keane describing it as, out of an anarchy, it suddenly became clear that what was governing the infinite monkeys now inputting away, I'm one of those, on the internet was the law of digital Darwinism, the survival of the loudest and the most opinionated. I might be one of those as well. Under these rules, the only way to intellectually prevail is by infinite filibustering. Not the word filibustering. And I just don't think there's a right or wrong response to this position, except to say that you must bear it in mind when using these resources. But I would say it's not any different from using any other media that exist. The soapbox, parliamentary hustings, newspapers and television, they all could have the same criticism levelled at them. I believe the problem is not the tool, but how it's used. I'll keep coming back to this point until you're sick of it, I'm sure. So my response to this criticism is to adulterate it slightly. So just have a quick look at that, and then have a look at that. I retort, out of this anarchy, it suddenly became clear that what was governing the infinite monkeys now publishing in medical journals was the law of print Darwinism, the survival of the richest and most influential big pharma companies. Under those rules, the only way to intellectually prevail is by infinite filibustering. I think the media is not the problem. I think it's how it's used that's the problem. Another criticism, the danger of social networking sites is that most are silos and don't allow users to port data from one site to another. And social networks can grow too big and become a monopoly, and this tends to limit innovation. Quite frankly, I think these just aren't true. The fluidity of the various media is incredible. I can see an ECG at work, like the one I took from you the other day. I can de-identify it. I can share it on Twitter. I can automatically upload it to my blog and have it commented on by Steve Smith or Amal Matsu within a matter of minutes or hours. I learn, I teach, and the lessons reverberate across the web if what you're saying is interesting enough, and enough people are looking. Innovation is celebrated and encouraged with dynamic enthusiasm in this community, and emergency medicine, and particularly Australian emergency medicine, is actually leading the way in this whole process. A recent BMJ article from just this month, which was discussing the whole thing, said there are clear things that doctors should not do, whether online or not, namely break confidentiality or perform illegal acts. The trend for online discussion through blogs, discussion forums, or Twitter means that more people can view what doctors are saying to each other. And I think this is true, but what it doesn't change is that the ethics are the same. The ethics of confidentiality predate all of this. It's got nothing to do with the medium. You shouldn't say bad things about people in print. You shouldn't expose a patient you're looking after in a photograph. It's no different with digital. Web 2.0 ethics breaches are no different than any other confidentiality breaches. They're just more public, and there's a record of it. So what's actually the case is that you're more likely to get caught if you do it, not that it's any worse. The response should not be to ban or restrict the medium, but to embrace it and teach people how to use it properly instead of driving it underground. In the workplace, this little Looning cartoon, I do love Looning. So if anyone disagrees with me, I'm probably bigger and uglier than you, so, and it's kind of good in this forum because it's hard to argue with people when there's a delay of people are having to press buttons at the other end, so I'll just move on before anyone does.
And on two specific instances in the slides, you've actually told us to shut up if we disagree.
Shut up, dummy. Now, here's where my hardware might fall in the heat, so just talk amongst yourselves for a second while I see if I can find my mouse. Where's it gone? There. Alrighty. So this is, if it works, a little graphic borrowed from Mike Cadogan, who recently who, as you probably know, is the lifeinthefastlane.com brainchild, or it's his brainchild. He recently spoke on this very topic, and I'm sure his talks were much more techy and slick than mine, but he recently spoke on this topic at Essentials of Emergency Medicine, Mel Herbert's talk in the US. And a lot of that was publicized on Twitter and through social media, and I actually felt like I was almost at the conference. I was getting such regular updates from it. And it's a lot cheaper than going there. But this is one of his little graphics. The sound that comes with it is just music playing. And I'm not sure how well this will come across the connection, because I know the frame rate is quite slow. But the point is just the kind of democratization and the egalitarianism between being an educator and being a learner, and the various processes involved. It's only a 40-second graphic, so the very last picture is probably the most useful. If anyone wants to comment as to how well that comes across, it might be worth knowing for future things. Anyway, there's a little picture of some textbooks on an iPhone there, which I think probably represents where we are at the moment. We're somewhere between the two. Anyway, so I'm hoping this will all go back to normal. Yeah, it works. Cool. Okay, so moving on from that, the benefits of social media. So I've done the cons, and now we'll go with the pros. The benefits of social media, in my opinion, these are tools for accessing and appraising the available information and resources. They don't exist independent of literature, evidence, textbooks, and journals. They sit above them, and they offer a window, lenses, and mirrors for them. They also offer a community where passionate and enthusiastic people can share their ideas without historical hierarchical borders. I can talk to some of the most prominent minds in emergency medicine in the States. Not that there aren't prominent minds in emergency medicine here, but we can all be part of this same community. You can get someone's opinion from the other side of the world who writes on this stuff. They'll talk to you like you're a human being. You know, these are people who are previously probably unassailable for your average person. That's just my little graphic to illustrate that point. So I think they're tools, they're windows, they're lenses, they're mirrors, and they offer a community. And I think they're tools which are now as vital to good and current practice as a stethoscope or a pen. And they're optics which peer broadly and deeply into the past, the present, and the future of medical practice. And it's an egalitarian, dynamic, and vibrant community. They offer open entry into what's been called by various commentators the conversation. And they give access to eminence and evidence, which is basically unparalleled in the history of education. The aspect of this, which I suspect some are uncomfortable with, is that you can't completely control your own message in this world. All you can do is join into the conversation, and the message takes on an organic life of its own, which obviously has some downsides, but certainly the opportunity to participate in that conversation means that you have an opportunity to spread your message, and what happens to that message is a purely organic thing. So there are a couple of components to the social media cycle which are variously described, and this is all a bit sort of dry, so I'm going to whiz through it. Variously described by academics in the IT world, but this is a sort of list of points that I've extracted from it, which I believe are important in medicine. So the creation of content, the dissemination of that content, the curation or looking after of it, the amplification, the reverberation, and the assimilation of it. So essentially the whole network is made up of people who create content, other people who like what they read, share it, other people look at theirs, they share it, someone looks after it somewhere, and there are different functions, various different sites. My own contributions to this, I do a little bit of creation, I do a fair bit of reverberation, I don't think I do any amplification because not enough people look at my website, and I assimilate some stuff, so I bring some things together. But all of it comes down to the end point of having some discussion, some unfettered peer review where people are commenting on this information without the confines of the formalized journal sort of Leviathan. And there's a sense of community in all of this as well, which is international. And this is just a little graphic to illustrate that whole cycle. So I'll briefly summarize and give examples of the array of platforms available. But basically what you want from these tools is that they're shareable, they're mobile, they're low maintenance, they're durable, they're credible, and they're cost effective or free. And personally, I also have the ones I use are certainly dominated by the lack of advertising and the lack of kind of background noise that you get in them. I personally hate Facebook. I find it not very useful, and there's far too much noise in the background. Another little fellowship doff of the cap, but clearly you can't use all of these. it's pointless being on heaps and heaps of them, and I don't even know what half of them are. But it'd be a good picture for a picture round in a pub quiz, if you could recognise what these sites are. But I'll just talk about a few of them in turn, and some of the ones that are more useful. I'll go through a few categories. Probably the most useful access to the whole setup is actually readers, aggregators, or RSS feeds. So things like Google Reader, extremely useful. They give you automatic updates from sites that you subscribe to, and they avoid having to visit individual websites. The stuff's there on tap. You set it as your home page, and every day you have updates, which you can either choose to ignore or read. It's much less annoying than having your inbox cluttered with things that you don't want to read because you can just not look at them. But certainly regular updates on RSS feeds, and I'll talk about how that works later for those that don't know, I find very useful. Wikis, Wikipedia is the obvious archetype, and it seems to be every intern or medical student's first port of call when stumped these days, no matter how accurate or inaccurate the information is. It's actually, Wikipedia is pretty good when stuff's been properly reviewed. It's actually very, very good. There are lots of stumps and things that are unfinished and so on that obviously require a bit of work, but certainly it's a fluid and ever-changing thing which is improving all the time. Blogs is the mainstay of the social media world. Most people who contribute and create content blog, and that's where the links to various things come. And these are just a few links which some of you may already know and may already use. Resource Me is by a guy called Cliff Reed in Melbourne. Some of you might know. The Poison Review is a chap called Liam Gusso, who writes fantastic stuff on toxicology from the US. ERcast is by a Northwest US guy called Rob Orman. AM Letter of Note is a fantastic, almost like a free journal watch for emergency medicine. Fantastic little synopsis and links to papers and discussion of issues in papers, which is a fantastic resource for keeping up. And the NNT.com, which does what are called deep dives into the literature and looks at what the data really means. It does it's sort of a Cochrane review for the practical person as opposed to the academic. And of course, the granddaddy of all of these is the WA-based lifeinthefastlane.com, which was essentially the primary resource I used for the fellowship. It's a repository of almost all of this stuff worldwide. There's nothing that compares to it. It's a fantastic resource, and particularly useful features include its enormous database of clinical images and ECGs, great exam resources. There's a new concept they started recently called R&R in the fast lane, which to me kind of represents evidence plus eminence. They use a selection of people worldwide of various backgrounds to pick 2 or 3 papers every couple of weeks and to share them with everybody, and they're supposed to be practice-changing papers or enlightening papers or interesting papers, and it's a fantastic way to keep up on what people are reading and what's important and what's topical. They do a regular review of all the other Web 2.0 resources and channel and funnel things that are really useful from that world and disseminate them, and they also do some fun stuff like their Fantabulously Frivolous Friday 5, which is a little pub quiz, 5-question medical pub quiz every Friday. And there's also been a recent series of articles on the differences between Launceston and the US by Rick Abbott, who's been up in Launceston for a while, I believe. There are also microblogs, which are things like the famous Twitter. And I find Twitter really useful. The discipline of a 140 character limit and the lack of advertising makes it a favorite. There's a couple of fantastic little things on it. For example, Michelle Johnson over in WA does a thing called #Path140, where she outlines a disease, its assessment, management, and so on in 140 characters, and they're very, very clever. And a couple of other links, I'm not going to go through them all. Pure social networking, the dreaded Facebook, not particularly useful, I believe. A lot of the same stuff that appears on Twitter appears on it as well, but you've got to cope with all the noise of people telling you that they've just had a cup of tea and they're feeling a bit down today, and a photograph of their backside and all that kind of stuff, so I prefer not to use it. And Bebo, don't know much about. LinkedIn's a kind of professional networking. To be honest, I'm not much sure how much use that is in medicine. I think it's more a businessy thing, although a lot of medics are on it. And then podcasts and vodcasts, which are sort of extensions of blogs. They're often viewable direct from the sites, or via RSS feeds, iTunes, or specific applications on mobile devices. And this is just an example 3 that I fairly regularly listen to. But there's obviously many, many of them. And YouTube and Vimeo are particularly good resources for little how-to videos, particularly for things like procedures. They're really quite useful. You can look up almost anything and learn how to do it. You could see one and then you could do one and teach one. Not necessarily encouraging that all you do is check YouTube before you go sticking bits of plastic into people, but certainly it's not that different from from the old apprenticeship model of see one, do one, teach one.